How many inches are in a foot? 12. How many feet are in a yard? 3. How many inches are in a yard? 36. Oh, yeah? How many feet are in a mile? Only a couple you know, or at least a... Oh, no. 5,280. So here's the deal. Standard units of measure or customary units of measure have a whole bunch of random conversions. They're a bunch of random ratios. I will tell you, when we get to the metric system, a lot of you, I say metric system, and you guys go, oh, yeah, that sound. That happens. But let me tell you what. You're going to find that the metric system is a lot easier to use once you know how to use it. Had I been asking you questions like how many if you'd been working with the metric system your whole life, and I asked you how many meters were in a kilometer, a bunch of you, almost every one of you in here would have gone 1,000 instantly. Okay? Because the metric system is based on tens. Okay? The customary units of measure are not based on 10. It's actually kind of a difficult system to use. And that's why most of scientific communities use the metric system. All the stuff in science is mostly metric, just because science is going to go throughout the entire world. We're going to use that across the world, and we are one of the few countries in the world that have decided to just stick with the old way of doing it and not go with the metric system. But since that's what we've chosen to do, we have to learn how to convert. We have to learn how to convert feet to miles, cups to quarts, quarts to gallons, all of that stuff. So, on your book, I want to say it's page 493 or something like that. I want everyone to open up your books to that, because there's going to be a chart. Your chart is going to look just like this. You guys are going to need this information. You're going to need to know that there is 12 inches in a foot, 36 inches in a yard, 3 feet in a yard, 5,280 feet in a mile, 1,760 yards in a mile, 16 ounces to a pound, all of those things. It's somewhere there, 9.3. It's somewhere close by. No, that's metric. Yeah, look, it's probably 9-3. 496. Page 496. So I want you to leave that page open, because you are going to need that page to be able to do your homework. You're going to need that chart to be able to do your homework. Okay? So, there are a couple of ways to do it, but I want to explain something to you. Again, just like before. You guys, I'm going to show you something, and a bunch of you are going to recognize a shortcut. You're going to immediately go, why can't we just do this? Because sometimes it doesn't always work, but the other reason is that I want to show you how it works. I want you to understand how to do the process. Because if you don't know how to do the process, later on when you get into grade 7, 8, 9, and so on, if you don't know how to do this by setting up a proportion, you're going to struggle. I want you to know how to do this by setting up a proportion. Okay? So, when you have this problem, you have 9 yards and you want to know how many feet it is. Now, most of you will be able to look at that and go, yeah, it's 27 feet. Because you know that there are 3 feet in a yard, and you have 9 yards, so it's just 9 times 3. Absolutely. Many of you can do that, no problem. I want to show you how it's set up with the proportion. Essentially, we do the same thing, but I want you to set up a proportion to do this. So what I want you to do is, you have yards to feet. There's a couple of steps to this whole process. The first step is, all I want you to do is write yards to feet. I want you to write that up there so that you can keep track. I'm going to have yards on top. I'm going to have feet on the bottom. That way you are able to keep everything straight. The next step that you take, step number 2, is looking in your book and finding out how many yards are there, how many yards to feet are there, or how many feet are there to yards, whichever one works. So what does it show you in your book? How many feet are there in a yard? So 3 to 1. It says right in your book, right? 3 to 1. So the 1 in your book is the yards. The feet in your book is 3. Notice I have 1 to 3. I kept yards on the top, and I kept feet on the bottom. Everyone follow me with that? So step number 1 is just deciding what are you going to have on top, what are you going to have on bottom. Step number 2 is looking in your book and getting the right ratio. 1 yard to 3 feet. 1 to 3. 1 yard to 3 feet. The next step is creating a proportion. Well, what do they give us? Do they give us yards, or do they give us feet in the problem, Cesar? They're giving us yards. So where do you think that 9 goes? Do you think that 9 goes on the top, or does the 9 go on the bottom? The 9 goes on the top. And why does the 9 go on the top? We have yards on top. This is our rule. We created this rule in step number 1. Yards goes on top. So we're going to keep yards up there. And then the one we're looking for is feet. So that becomes our x. Now we have a proportion. Now we have a problem that you guys all know how to solve. This times this. So 1 times x equals 1x equals 3 times 9, which is 27. And actually, when we have 1x, now if you really wanted to, you could go you could go through your algebra and you could go divide by 1, x equals 27. If you want to do that, fine. You know what? I'm pretty sure that all of you recognize that 1x is the same as just x. So you don't even have to do that. Okay? This is what I want to see on your homework. That I want to see that. I need to see that. I want you guys to be able to show me that you know how to set up the proportion. Okay? So let's do the next one together. You guys can do it on your whiteboard together, or you can take some notes if that's what you need to do. £10,000 to tons. So step number 1 of this process is deciding what do we want on top, what do we want on bottom. Which do we want on top? It doesn't matter. Makes no difference. Jonathan, you want pounds on top. Okay. Pounds to tons. P over T. So step number 2, we need to look in our book. Which ratio in our book shows pounds to tons, and how many are there of each? 2,000 pounds is how many tons? So our ratio is 2,000 to 1. Step number 2, then, or 3 actually. Step number 3, what we need to do is figure out from the problem, what do they give us, pounds or tons? What do they give us? And how many of them? And does that go on top or on bottom? Okay, 10,000 on the top. We're looking for this. Now we have to solve this problem, this proportion, which is 2,000x equals 1 times 10,000, which is 10,000. So it's 2,000x equals 10,000. Now, we don't have x already by itself, so now we have to get it by itself. So we have to divide this by 2,000. Divide this by 2,000. And x ends up equaling 5. 5 what? Tons. We're looking for tons. 5 tons. Okay? By the way, I'm going to show you guys a quick shortcut. If you're dividing numbers like this, 10,000 divided by 2,000, did you know that you can just get rid of zeros at the end? Now you have 10 divided by 2, which is 5. What?
Instead of doing that, couldn't you just like divide 10,000 by 2,000?
That's what we did.
You did it really long and hard way.
Absolutely. I know I did it really long and hard way. Do you remember at the very beginning of this, I said most of you are going to be able to recognize a shortcut really fast, and that you guys will be able to solve this problem without any difficulty? Basically, what you guys are doing is you guys are able to do this proportion in your head because you're good at it. But once we get into more complicated problems and more complicated numbers, you're not going to be able to do that. Okay? It's going to get it to be a little bit more difficult for you. So I want you to know how to do the proportion. On your whiteboards, why don't you guys try to do this one? It's really easy to confuse where to put what numbers. It's really easy. That is why I am having you guys do this Q over P. Even though you don't use that as part of your problem, I'm having you write that just to keep track of which is which. Okay? Now, I believe that it's, what, 2 pints to a quart? Is that what it was? So it's, you want to go 2, because step number 1 then, or step number 2 of this is looking in your book. So 2 pints equals 1 quart. So that's why we have 1 on the top, because we're talking about quarts there. Equals 3 quarts. We're going to want quarts on top. That there. We got x equals 6 pints. That's what you come up with now. I decided to do feet over miles. I look in my book then, the next step. I go feet, there's 5,280 over 1. That's my first ratio in the proportion. Jonathan, okay? Follow the steps, please. The first step, then, after you decide your rules, where you want feet or where you want miles, after you decide what you want on top, then you have to write your first ratio. Your first ratio comes from the book. Equals, the second ratio comes from the problem. 15,840 over x. Then you got 5,280x equals 15,840. You have an algebraic expression. You solve it by dividing both sides by 5,280. X equals, divided by 5,280, which is going to be 3 miles. No. No. That one. The answer to this is 360 inches. Your homework is page 498, 14 to 42 even.